On today's Chasing the Game, we have WTOL 11 meteorologist John Burchfield on to talk about running, his racing career, and even the Olympic trials. Chasing the Game starts right now. Welcome into Chasing the Game. I'm here with WTOL 11 meteorologist John Burchfield. John, thank you so much for being on. Usually when we have you on, it's to talk about weather, but now we're talking about something a little bit different, your racing career.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me, Chase.
Absolutely. So where did running start for you? Was that something you were doing as a little kid?
So a lot of people always suggested that I run cross country growing up because they assumed I'm tall, got long legs, I'd be good at it. I actually never did. You know, I was pretty good at sports as a kid. I played baseball, played basketball, was pretty good at golf and tennis, but never ran really growing up. Running was kind of just like, you know, the punishment for other sports. I know it's the joke that, you know, our sport is your sport's punishment. You know, it was running laps back and forth on the tennis courts or back and forth in the gym. But I never really was talented or showed any signs of potential. Really, I started to pick it up a little later in life when I was around 21 years old. And I guess for the last 9 years, it's I guess you could say it's history, but really just been kind of a slow, gradual build, just staying patient. And finally, the results seem to be coming.
So did it start as something to stay in shape and then it evolved into, hey, I'm pretty good at this, like maybe I could do this more competitively?
Yeah, exactly. Never really thought that it'd be something I'd be good at. You know, I wasn't exactly the healthiest back in college, so it was more so just kind of a measure to stay in shape. My dad actually inspired me because he started running when my grandfather was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It was just kind of a preventative measure, something he could do to reduce his risk of also getting that. And, you know, as you get older, you want to stay active and stay healthy. So for me, I thought, okay, well, if my dad did it, then I can do it too. So he was definitely a big inspiration in that and really kicking off the journey around age 21. I don't know exactly when it was that I realized I was pretty good at it, but the one thing I always noticed is I was passionate about it. You know, even though I didn't have any initial talent or promise, always just really loved it, loved the journey, and I love that there's always like another level you can get to. There's always ways to get better.
Do you remember that first race? Because for me, I run, but not nearly to the level that you do. But do you remember that first race, what that was like?
Yeah, so I do. So it wasn't an impressive time, but it's kind of funny that I still remember the time to this day. So I ran my first half marathon in 2015. It was 1 hour and 38 minutes. So it was, you know, about 7:15 a mile. So definitely a decent first half marathon, but, you know, for a 21-year-old able-bodied male, nothing crazy as far as a fast time. But yeah, I'll always remember that it was in western Michigan, kind of in like wine country, so it was really hilly, really rolling, scenic course. But I just felt so proud crossing that finish line. It was almost like this, you know, metaphor for self-improvement, moving towards a better version of yourself. And I just felt really accomplished, even though the time wasn't anything great. I kind of fell in love with the sport then, back in 2015.
How did the training evolve from there? I mean, were you going from someone who was maybe doing it, you know, a couple of times a week to every day? Like, how did that evolve for you?
Yeah, so I really didn't know anything about the sport initially. I would just read some books, read everything that I could online, definitely devoured whatever information I could get. So I was self-coached really for the first, you know, 6 or 7 years. I didn't really have a coach until the start of 2023. So it's actually a fairly new thing. And I feel like 2023 also coincides with when I started to get those breakthroughs. So I don't think that's just a coincidence. I think it helps to have someone who reins me in a little bit. You know, one of the functions of a coach, and this is true of any sport, isn't just telling you like when to train, when to work out, but it's also holding you back and reining it in. If you overdo it or overtrain, that can be just as bad as not working hard enough. And I think a lot of competitive athletes, you know, they're willing to put in the work, they love the grind, but sometimes the coach has to hold them back a little bit. You know, in basketball and football, you got to sleep, you got to recover. If you don't get enough sleep, you can't absorb the training and get better. And it's like that with running too. I feel like when I was self-coached, you know, I'd put in the miles, put in all the training, but I was always just a little bit overcooked as far as the training goes. So I feel like having a coach has really helped allow me to maximize that training while still getting them the recovery and making sure that I'm not overdoing it.
When it comes to long distance, whether it's, you know, half marathon, marathon, ultra marathon, how hard are you going? How long are you going in the build up to a race? Are you doing all 12 miles or 13.1? Are you doing all 20? Like, how do you sort of build up to it?
Yeah, so it takes a lot of trust in the fitness. Obviously, the longer the distance, the harder it can be on your body. So leading up to the Houston Marathon, the longest I actually went at my race pace in training was 14 miles, so a little bit over half of it. So you've just got to trust that, hey, on race day, when I'm rested, when I'm feeling good and tapered, I can go that extra 12 miles. So, you really do have to have faith and trust in the process, and it did end up working out. So you're not only doing like work at marathon pace, but you're doing like some of the faster traditional intervals, stuff like going to the track and running mile repeats or 800-meter repeats. That stuff is a little bit more sparing in the marathon training cycle, because at the end of the day, you just got to run that consistent pace for over 2 hours. But the intervals do kind of help make it feel a little bit easier. It's almost like what I'd call the batting donut effect. When you're on deck, you swing with the batting donut and it feels lighter. And that's why you do intervals, because when you run those faster intervals, you go to do marathon pace and you're like, oh, that's actually a little bit easier than it felt before.
Yeah. What's that like mentally, I guess, to, you get there and you're beyond the 13 mile, you're beyond halfway, you get into those later miles. Is it a mental game more than a physical game at that point?
It's a little bit of both for sure. And sometimes you start hurting or struggling early on in the race. So actually, at Houston, where I just ran 2 hours and 21 minutes, I went through a rough patch already about 6 miles into the race. I started feeling a little bit of abdominal cramping that was coming from my lungs. And I was like, oh boy, here we go again. Because at Chicago back in October, I had some cramping issues and finished a lot slower than I wanted to. So basically, you just have to stay present and stay in the moment. And you need to think, okay, I've done everything in my power to prepare. How I feel now could be fleeting. It's not going to last for the entire time. Just stick to my fueling strategy, because you're taking in water, carbohydrates during the race, and it did go away eventually. I would say miles 10 to 20, I felt great, and then after mile 20, it was just a world of hurt.
So what is the fueling like during the race? How much water do you think you're putting in? How much food are you putting in? What's that like? Yeah,
so I'm taking in basically carbohydrate gels every 4 miles, which it's very quick acting sorts of energy. So I take them at 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and then 24. So I think it's around 150 to 200 grams of carbs over the course of the race. And you're burning all that, of course. Yeah. And that doesn't even account for, I'm sure viewers have heard of the infamous carb load. You're not necessarily just stuffing your face with a pizza the night before, but It's those days leading up, lots of carbohydrate. And then I'm taking my sports drink in as well during the race. So it's kind of interesting to practice. You're running at a fast pace and you got to be drinking water and taking in these gels. So that's something I do practice in training as well. And it's something that's really important on race day. It makes sure that, in those later stages, you're still strong, you're still well fueled. There's this kind of old saying of hitting the wall in the marathon. If you're not well fueled, you will notice and you will pay for it later on in the stages.
What's the fueling like in the weeks, months? Like, what's your routine like? Are you getting up at 5 a.m. every day? I don't know what your routine is like.
So
John,
I'm not really a morning person, and part of that's my work schedule.
Neither am I.
Yeah, when you got to do the 11 o'clock news, you're not really a morning runner. So on a typical day-to-day basis, I would say that I go out for training like late morning, like 10 a.m. to noon. And a lot of the times I actually do have to get in like a shorter second run in the evenings. So, instead of taking a dinner break, might get in like a 5-mile second run just to stack those miles. So like a typical easy day might be 10 in the morning, 5 in the evening, something like that. But the race itself starts early in the morning. So I was really diligent about preparing my sleep schedule. So race morning, I woke up at 3:50 a.m. It was early.
For a what start time? What
for 6:55.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was early. So thankfully I was traveling west one time zone, so it felt like it was an hour later, because the further west you go, it's kind of adjusting your sleep schedule. So I adjusted my sleep schedule for the whole week. Actually slept pretty well the night before the race. It's just weird to wake up in the middle of the night at a time where I'd normally be sound asleep.
What's the sleep like? Are you always like an 8-hour person? Are you 9 hours? Like, how are you measuring it with, like, do you have a whoop strap? Like, what are all the different things that you're doing to measure sleep?
Yeah, I mean, I use my Garmin watch to keep track of it. I would say that I love sleep. It's even before I started
right there with you, John.
Yeah, even before I started running, it's just like, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
You feel good after 8 hours of sleep. Sometimes after a hard workout, I'll sleep for 9 to 10 hours if I can. On my days off work, I do try to squeeze in a nap if I can, but sometimes just an extra cup of coffee you got to go with. But yeah, I'd say consistent 8+ hours is the way to go if you're able to.
You mentioned something earlier about, having a performance that was slower than you'd like, or, right where you want to be.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of set a goal for yourself? Because you're going up against hundreds of people.
Yeah.
What's a good performance in your mind?
I think above all else, the time is important, but you just want to feel like you got the best out of yourself on the day, and you want to finish the race feeling like I did everything that I could to execute a race. And I think that's what I was so proud of this past weekend at Houston. Wasn't necessarily just the time, but it's almost like you're putting together like a work of art, and like every brush stroke matters to that artwork looking complete at the end. And the same thing is like every mile, it's almost like you want to go the pace it well, you want to fuel well, like all these things need to come together. But when you finally see the finished product at the end, you're like, wow, each one of those brush strokes really mattered and made a difference. And, crossing the finish line, knowing you executed a smart race feels really good.
Yeah, and then Houston obviously was very good for you. You had a performance, I think that you said one of your best that you had in a while.
Yeah.
What was it about? Everything seemed to be clicking for that race. What was it about that one?
Yeah, so I think it's really just, the consistency over time. And I think we also need to realize that progress in life isn't always linear. Sometimes it's one step back for two steps forward. And it's a frustrating thing to realize because as much as we would like to get better every single time, sometimes, you have to have those bad days and those disappointments to get better. So I wouldn't really say there's anything different that I did. The week leading up to it was not even ideal necessarily. I had trouble sleeping a little bit. My wife and I were just a little bit sick and under the weather. So even like flying out to Houston, I'm like, oh no, I feel congested, feel plugged up. So I don't think I was totally 100%. And then even the weather forecast, that makes a big difference in the marathon. The temperature was nice, but it was very windy. There were wind gusts up to 35 miles an hour.
This is so great, by the way, because this is an intersection of your two things that you're really passionate about, is weather and running. How often does that intersect, by the way?
Runners love talking about the weather. It's kind of a running joke, pun intended, that, people like making small talk about the weather. But yeah, runners love talking about it, and it does make a big difference, especially when there's 35-mile-an-hour wind gusts blowing straight at you. And I'm not necessarily the most aerodynamic, being on the taller side, so the wind, not my friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, despite those conditions, you kind of need to realize that you don't have to have a perfect day. You're never going to have a perfect day, and that's true of any sport. Like sometimes you got to prepare to play football in the snow, and that's never ideal, but you got to kind of adjust your strategy accordingly.
Yeah, and so a little bit colder weather. I mean, obviously you have the great performance. What was the time? It was 2 hours and how much?
2:21.
2:21, which is a phenomenal time when you think about it. It was so good, in fact, that you're starting to think about the U.S. Marathon Olympic trials. Help explain that to me. How does this work?
Yeah, so I know 2028 is a long way away, and we just had the Paris Olympics in 2024, but it's something I've really dreamed about, I would say, for the last 6 to 7 years, but it's not something I've necessarily publicly announced just because it's such a lofty goal, but I feel like now I'm within striking distance, and that's kind of what Houston was about, was getting within striking distance for me. So to qualify for the Paris Olympic trials, you had to run 2 hours and 18 minutes, and the official time standard is getting announced at the end of this year. So I don't technically know what it is yet, but it's likely to be around 2:18. So if you think about it, that's another 3 minutes off my time, which is actually very close.
Yeah.
In Houston, that was a 6-minute PR for me. So if I run a 3-minute PR, then it could be a lock for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really phenomenal. You're so close. I mean, 3 minutes, it's so small an amount of time when you think about 2 hours and 21 minutes, but also there's so much training left to do.
Yeah.
Does the training get ratcheted up another step to get to that level?
Oh man, I think my coach is going to bump up the mileage this year. I was already running about 100 miles a week, but we might start to get up towards 110 to even 120. So a lot of weekly mileage. I would say also like the strength training and lifting really played a big role for me in Houston. I felt like I was stronger and more powerful, so I wasn't just like in survival mode. I was actually getting after it and like hammering the pace later on in the marathon. So I'm going to work with my physical therapist and strength coach to try to improve my lifting and strength training so that I can feel good in that second half. And then, running more mileage is always kind of the answer too, to get better.
Do people think that you're crazy when you tell them the amount of mileage that because I hear that it's like, well, yeah, you would need to do that if you needed to, prepare for a marathon. Like, what do people say when you tell them how many miles?
People say, I don't even think I drive that much in my car.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the odometer is pretty high.
Yes, for sure. So 2028 in Los Angeles. Have you ever been out to Los Angeles before?
I have not. So I don't know where the trials themselves will be held. Usually the Olympic trials are in February, so it's always in the South somewhere. Like Florida, Texas. It could be in Houston for all I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, once that standard gets announced later this year, I'm probably gonna make an attempt at it. I think for the spring, I'm not planning on doing a marathon. I'm gonna focus a little more on the shorter stuff. Because a lot of the guys at my level, they ran in high school, ran in college, so they have that track background. But for me, I didn't start until later in life, so I kind of have a lot of untapped speed, I feel like. So this spring will be about tapping into that. Not necessarily on the track, but more like road races, like 10K road race or half marathon. Just getting that speed under me, because as I said earlier, that speed helps the marathon feel a little easier.
Yeah, and 30 years old right now. You'd be 34 in 2028.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel? Oh, go ahead.
I think one of the cool things about the marathon is it's one of those rare sports where you actually continue to get better with age.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a lifelong thing for me. Ultimately, I do want to enjoy it well, as long as possible. But with the marathon, so in 2020, the United States actually had a guy who made the Olympic team, and he was 45, and that was his 5th Olympic team. Yeah. So it's the kind of thing that you can excel at well into your 40s if you stick with it. Yeah. So yeah, just knock on wood. Hopefully I stay healthy and consistent.
Absolutely. And John, we're wishing the absolute best for you, rooting you on. I know running is a very personal thing for you, so I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. Yeah, so absolutely. It's very cool to talk about it. It's spectacular when you think about the speed that you achieve, over such a long distance. It's really phenomenal to watch it. So I appreciate all your success.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Still a lot of work yet to be done, but definitely taking a moment to just savor where I've come.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this has been another edition of Chasing the Game. Be sure to check out our other episodes and be sure to catch our newest episodes on the WTOL 11 Plus app. We'll see you next time.